The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, its golden fizz hissing into the silence of the penthouse suite. Isabella Romano stood frozen in her ivory wedding gown, the lace train pooling like spilled moonlight. Her new husband, Marco De Luca, was gone. The door to their honeymoon suite hung ajar, the city's neon pulse flickering through the crack. Her veil, still pinned to her auburn curls, trembled as she sucked in a breath, the air sharp with betrayal. "Isa," her sister's voice, soft but urgent, cut through the haze. Sophia Romano stepped into the room, her bridesmaid dress rustling, her eyes wide with dread. "Where's Marco?" Isabella's fingers clutched the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles whitening. "He left." Her voice cracked, barely a whisper, as if saying it aloud made it real. The room spun. The crystal chandelier above, the untouched cake on its silver stand, the rose petals scattered like bloodstains across the bed. "Left?" Sophia's brows furrowed, her heels clicking as she crossed the room. "What do you mean left? It's your wedding night." Isabella's gaze dropped to the broken glass, its shards glinting like accusations. He didn't say anything, just grabbed his jacket and walked out. Her throat tightened. She pressed a hand to her chest, the weight of her diamond ring like a stone sinking into her heart. Sophia knelt beside her, gathering the hem of Isabella's gown to keep it from the mess. "This doesn't make sense. You two were dancing an hour ago." He was smiling, whispering in your ear, "I saw it." Isabella's laugh was brittle. Smiling. "Yeah, he's good at that." She turned to the floor-to-ceiling window, Manhattan's skyline sprawling below like a glittering lie. Her reflection stared back, pale, eyes smudged with mascara. A bride abandoned before the ink on the marriage certificate dried. Memory replayed in jagged flashes. Marco's hand warm on her waist during their first dance, his low chuckle as he spun her under the chandeliers, the kiss on her forehead, promising forever. Then, after the last guest left, he took a call. She'd waited, sipping champagne, adjusting her earrings, expecting him to return with that boyish grin. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sweet silence grew louder than the wedding band's music. Sophia stood, voice sharpening. "Isa, call him, now." Isabella fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she dialed. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. His voice, smooth, practiced, filled the air. "This is Marco De Luca. Leave a message." She hung up, pulse hammering. "He's not answering." "Then we go find him." Sophia grabbed her purse, but Isabella shook her head, sinking onto the velvet chaise. Her gown rustled, too loud in the quiet. "No, he doesn't want to be found." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "What aren't you telling me?" Isabella traced the edge of her ring, the metal cold against her skin. Something was off all day. He kept checking his phone during the ceremony. And when we were alone, She stopped, breath hitching. "He looked at me like I was a stranger." Sophia's face softened, but a knock rattled the door. Both women froze. Isabella's heart lurched, foolish hope cutting sharp that it was Marco. Sophia yanked the door open. It wasn't Marco. Bianca Russo, one of Marco's colleagues from the firm, stood there, her sequined dress catching the hallway light. Her lips were tight. Her eyes darted between the sisters. "Isabella, I need to talk to you." Isabella rose, her gown heavy as armor. "What is it, Bianca?" Bianca hesitated, twisting a cocktail napkin. "I overheard something tonight at the reception. I didn't want to believe it, but..." She glanced at Sophia, then back. "It's about Marco, and why he married you." The air thickened, pressing against Isabella's chest. "Say it," she demanded, voice low. "Dangerous." Bianca swallowed, the words tumbling out. "He was talking to one of the partners, laughing about how you were convenient, a way to get back at Valentina." Isabella's knees buckled. She gripped the chaise to stay upright. Valentina. Marco's ex-fiancée. The name he'd sworn was ancient history. The name he'd whispered once in sleep their first weekend away. "Convenient," Isabella echoed, voice ablade. "What does that even mean?" Bianca's gaze dropped. "He said marrying you would show Valentina he'd moved on. That he could have anyone. You were..." She winced. "The perfect choice to make her jealous." Sophia gasped, hand flying to her mouth. That bastard! Isabella's vision blurred, not with tears, but with rage. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. She ripped the veil from her hair, pins scattered like shrapnel. He used me, she said, each word a spark igniting something feral. He stood there, said vows, looked me in the eyes, and it was all a game. I'm so sorry, Bianca whispered. I thought you should know before the rumors start. Let them talk, Isabella laughed, sharp, unhinged. Let the whole damn city know Marco De Luca is a coward who ran out on his wife. Sophia gripped her arm, firm. Isa, don't do anything rash. We'll figure this out. Figure it out? Isabella yanked free, voice rising. He humiliated me, Sophia. He took my heart and... She stopped, breath ragged. The absence of Marco's presence was a gaping wound. She turned to the window again. City lights pulsed like a heartbeat, indifferent to her pain. Somewhere out there, Marco was free, unburdened by the vows he'd broken. Isabella's fingers curled into fists, nails biting her palms. Bianca, she said finally, voice steady now, cold as the marble beneath her feet. Who else knows? Just a few people from the firm, but it'll spread. You know how fast gossip moves. Isabella nodded, mind racing, already hearing whispers, seeing pitying glances at the next gala, the headlines, bride abandoned on wedding night. Her chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe. She wouldn't be that woman, the one who crumbled, who let a man's betrayal define her. Sophia, Isabella said, turning to her sister. Get my coat. Where are you going? Sophia's voice was laced with worry. To find out who Marco De Luca really is, and why he thought he could break me. She stepped over the shattered flute. The crunch of glass under her heel was a promise. 3 days later, the crunch echoed in her mind as she stepped out of a cab, the city's pulse throbbing around her. The Manhattan skyline loomed, steel and glass indifferent to the ache in her chest. Isabella adjusted her tailored black trench, armor, and stared up at the sleek tower housing De Luca and Associates, Marco's law firm. Her wedding ring caught the streetlights, a cruel reminder she hadn't yet torn off. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of wealth, marble floors, sharp-angled art, the faint scent of leather and ambition. Isabella's heels clicked with purpose, though her heart pounded like a war drum. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. Demand answers. Make him face her. Explain why he left her stranded in that penthouse suite. Why he used her to wound someone else. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was a blur. Mirrored walls throwing back a reflection with shadowed eyes and a jaw set like stone. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile, looked up as Isabella approached. Ms. Romano. Do you have an appointment? It's Ms. Romano. And no, I don't need one to see my husband. She strode past before protest could form, pulse spiking as she pushed through glass doors into the open-plan office. Heads turned. Associates in crisp suits paused mid-conversation, whispers trailing her like a wake. The gossip had spread, wildfire she couldn't outrun. Isabella lifted her chin, eyes scanning until they found Marco's corner office, glass walls offering no privacy. He was there, leaning back, phone to ear, laughing. The sound hit like a slap. She didn't knock. The door swung open with a soft whoosh. Marco's laughter died. He looked up, hazel eyes narrowing, phone still pressed to his ear. I'll call you back, he muttered, hanging up without breaking her gaze. Isabella, flat, no warmth, no guilt. He stood, smoothing his navy silk tie, the one she'd helped him pick. What are you doing here? Her throat tightened, but the words came. You left me on our wedding night. No note, no call, nothing. I deserve to know why. Marco sighed, heavy with irritation, leaning against his desk. This isn't the place, Isa. You're making a scene. A scene? Her voice rose, sharp enough to turn more heads beyond the glass. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know, and I'm making a scene. Tell me why, Marco. Tell me why you married me if it was all a lie. His jaw tightened. He crossed his arms. You want the truth? Fine, I never loved you. You were convenient. Valentina was sniffing around again, and I needed to show her I'd moved on. You fit the part. The words landed like a blade. She'd heard it from Bianca, but from him, cold voice, empty eyes, was a fresh wound. Fit the part, she echoed, trembling. I gave you everything. My trust, my heart, my future. Then you were naive, he snapped. Stop embarrassing yourself, Isabella. Go home. The office hum faded to a dull roar in her ears. She felt their eyes, colleagues, interns, partners, witnessing her unravel. Her chest heaved, but she refused to cry. Not here, not for him. Embarrassing myself? She stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. You're the coward who ran. You lied at the altar, vowed to love me, and now you can't even look me in the eye. Marco's gaze flickered. Not to her, but past her, to the glass wall. Isabella followed it and saw the crowd. Some pretended to work. Others openly stared. And then she noticed him. A man stood near the conference room, still, yet somehow commanding. Tall, broad-shouldered, in a charcoal suit that seemed to swallow light. He watched with an intensity that prickled Isabella's skin. Marco shifted, fingers twitching against the desk, a bead of sweat glinting at his temple. Who's that? Isabella asked, barely above a whisper. Marco's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he straightened. We're done here, Isa. Go home, or I call security. The threat hit hard, but it was the stranger's gaze that held her. For a split second, his eyes met hers. A jolt, something raw and unspoken, passed through. Then he turned away, disappearing into the conference room, leaving only the echo of his presence. Isabella's hands shook as she backed toward the door. You'll regret this, Marco, she said, voice steady despite the storm. You don't get to break me and walk away. He didn't respond. He turned to his computer, dismissing her like nothing. She spun on her heel, the office a blur of faces, whispers chasing her to the elevator. The doors closed. She pressed her back against the wall, breath ragged. The ring on her finger felt like a shackle. She yanked it off, clutching so tightly it bit into her palm. Tears burned. She blinked them back. The city roared outside, taxis honking, pedestrians weaving, Manhattan relentless. She clutched her purse, the ring a heavy weight inside, and started down the sidewalk, heels unsteady on the uneven pavement. She didn't see him at first. The man from the office, Dante Moretti, though she didn't know his name yet, stood near a sleek black car, a driver holding the door. He spoke into his phone, voice low and authoritative. His eyes found her again, tracking her as she passed. Isabella felt it before she saw him. That same prickle of awareness, a current under her skin. She stopped. Their gazes locked. He ended his call abruptly, slipped the phone away, and took a measured step toward her. Polished shoes silent on the pavement. Up close, he was even more imposing. Dark hair swept back, a jawline sharp enough to cut, and those eyes like storm clouds before a strike. You're Isabella Romano, he said, voice deep, a faint rasp making her name sound like a secret. She stiffened, wiping quickly at her face. Do I know you? No. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. But I know your husband, she swallowed. Ex-husband soon enough. And you are? Dante Moretti. No handshake. No pleasantries, just that piercing stare that seemed to see through her. I was in the office, he said. I saw everything. Her cheeks burned, Marco's cold dismissal flashing hot. Great. Another witness to my humiliation. She turned to go. His voice stopped her. He was nervous. The words were deliberate, each one a stone in still water. When I watched him, Marco, he couldn't hold my gaze. Isabella turned back slowly. What are you saying? Dante tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he hadn't solved. I'm saying your husband isn't as untouchable as he thinks. Men like him crumble when you press the right nerve. Why do you care? Her voice edged. You don't even know me. His eyes darkened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then I know enough. I know what it looks like when someone's been used. The words hit too close. Her defenses rose. I don't need your pity. It's not pity. Firm, almost sharp. It's recognition. The wind tugged at her coat. She hugged her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how small she felt under his gaze. Why are you telling me this? He stepped closer, close enough for the faint scent of sandalwood and smoke. Something untamed. Because you're not the kind of woman who breaks, he said. And I don't forget a face like yours. Her breath caught. For a moment, the city faded. There was only his stare, unyielding, like he saw something in her she'd forgotten existed. He stepped back, breaking the spell. Take care, Isabella Romano. He turned, slid into the car. The door closed. The vehicle pulled away, leaving her alone on the sidewalk, with his words burning in her chest. I don't forget a face like yours. Daniel thought he'd broken her. He was wrong, and something told her Dante Moretti knew it too. Marco DeLuca leaned back in his leather chair, the city's skyline sprawling beyond his office window, a glittering cage he had built for himself. The hum of Manhattan at dusk filtered through the glass, but it couldn't drown out the pulse hammering in his temples. His fingers drummed against the desk, the rhythm erratic, betraying the calm mask he wore. Isabella's visit that afternoon had rattled him, her fury, her refusal to crumble. But it wasn't her face that haunted him now. It was Dante Moretti's. Those dark, unyielding eyes watching from across the office, cutting through the glass walls like a blade through silk. Marco's gaze flicked to the whiskey decanter on the shelf, its amber glow tempting. He resisted, wiping a hand across his jaw where faint stubble scratched his palm. He hadn't really slept since the wedding night. Leaving Isabella had felt clean, surgical, a means to an end. A way to twist the knife in Valentina's heart. But Isabella's confrontation today, her voice sharp with betrayal, had cracked something in him. And then there was Dante. Marco's mind spiraled back to 5 years ago, a deal that still left a sour taste in his mouth. He'd been younger then, hungrier, reckless. A real estate venture in Brooklyn, a shady partnership with a developer named Salvatore Ricci. Marco had been the lawyer, the one who smoothed the edges, fudged the numbers, made the permits disappear. It was supposed to be a quick flip, millions in profit, no questions asked. Dante Moretti had been the silent investor, the shadow behind the deal. His name whispered like a warning. Never cross him, Salvatore had said one night over cigars, eyes darting like a hunted animal. Moretti doesn't play games. He plays for blood. Marco hadn't believed it then. Dante was just a name, a mafia boss with a reputation, not a god. But when the deal went south, when Salvatore tried to skim profits thinking Dante wouldn't notice, everything unraveled. Marco could still hear Salvatore's panicked voice on the phone. He knows, Marco, I'm done. Within weeks, Salvatore was ruined. His company bankrupted, his assets seized, his name blacklisted. Rumors swirled, lawsuits, audits, a late-night accident that left Salvatore limping and scarred. He refused to speak of what really happened. Marco had watched from the sidelines, his hands technically clean, but his conscience stained. He'd been smart enough to step back when the deal collapsed, to nod and smile and never cross Dante directly. But he had seen enough to know Salvatore hadn't lied. Dante Moretti didn't just win. He destroyed. Now Marco's fingers twitched, reaching for his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, hesitating over Valentina's name. He'd married Isabella to hurt her, to prove he didn't need her. But the plan felt hollow now, tasteless. And Dante's presence today, that silent, predatory stare, was a warning. Marco knew it in his bones. He set the phone down, eyes darting to the office door, half expecting Dante to walk through it. The memory of their last encounter years ago was sharp enough to cut. A charity gala, champagne and small talk, until Dante had cornered him by the bar. "You're smart, DeLuca," he'd said, voice low, almost amused. "Stay that way." No threat, no raised voice, just eyes that seemed to see every lie Marco had ever told. Since then, Marco had avoided Dante like plague. He pulled out of projects when Dante's name surfaced. He skipped events, citing scheduling conflicts or strategic pivots. He told himself it was caution, not cowardice. But deep down he knew the truth. Dante Moretti scared him. Not the fear of a fistfight or a lawsuit, something colder. The kind of fear that came from knowing one man could unravel your life with a single command. His phone buzzed, snapping him back. A text from his assistant. Moretti's crew requested a meeting next week. Project merger, your input needed. Marco's stomach dropped. A merger now? After years of dodging him, the man was back, circling like a shark. Marco's mind raced, piecing it together. Dante had been in the office today for a meeting with senior partners. But he stayed. watched Marco tear Isabella apart. Why? What did he want? Marco drafted a reply. Out of town next week. Then deleted it. Too obvious. He couldn't afford to look weak. Not now. Not with Isabella stirring trouble, the firm's partners watching every move. He needed to play this smart. Keep Dante at arm's length without drawing his attention. Marco stood pacing. The city outside was a chessboard, and he was a pawn who had wandered too close to a king. He thought of Isabella, her eyes blazing as she stormed out. She wasn't supposed to fight back. She was supposed to fade into the background, a footnote in his revenge against Valentina. But now, with Dante's shadow looming, Marco felt the ground shift beneath him. He grabbed his coat, desperate for air. The office was suffocating. As he stepped into the elevator, his phone buzzed again. Another text. This time from an unknown number. Careful, DeLuca. Some debts don't stay buried. Marco's breath caught. The elevator doors slid open. He stumbled into the lobby, marble underfoot, the doorman oblivious to the panic clawing his chest. Outside, the city roared, indifferent. But Marco's eyes scanned the street, half expecting to see Dante's black car idling in the shadows. He hailed a cab, hands shaking as he slid inside. Just drive, he muttered. The driver didn't ask questions. Marco sank into the seat, mind churning. Dante Moretti wasn't just a name anymore. He was here, watching, waiting. Marco didn't know what Dante wanted, but he knew one thing. He'd do whatever it took to stay out of his way. The cab's radio crackled, a love song Isabella used to hum. Marco closed his eyes. Her face flashed in his mind, not broken, not defeated, but burning with fire. And behind her, always, those dark eyes watching him crumble. Weeks had passed since Isabella's confrontation in Marco's office, since Dante Moretti's shadow had crept back into her life. Marco buried himself in work, dodging merger meetings, charity invites, anything with Moretti's name attached. But tonight there was no escape. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala was non-negotiable. Partners at DeLuca and Associates expected him to show face, shake hands, charm Manhattan's elite. Marco adjusted his cufflinks, the gold glinting under streetlights as he stepped out of his town car, dread twisting in his gut. Inside the Waldorf's grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast warm glow over black tie elegance. The air hummed with clinking glasses, murmured deals, and the string quartet's soft strains. He spotted her before she saw him. Isabella Romano. Her silhouette stood out against the gilded backdrop. Deep emerald gown shimmering like forest dusk. Auburn hair swept up to reveal the curve of her neck. She stood near a marble column, a champagne flute in hand, eyes sharp, distant, like she was waiting for someone. Marco's chest tightened. He hadn't seen her since the office. The gossip of their wedding night had spread like wildfire, yet she carried herself with defiance that made whispers feel small. He turned, ready to disappear into the crowd. But then he saw him. Dante Moretti. In a tailored black tuxedo, his presence cut through the gala like a quiet storm. His gaze found Isabella instantly. Deliberate steps carried him toward her. Isabella sensed him before he spoke, the air shifting with the same electric prickle she'd felt outside his office. She turned, fingers tightening on her glass as Dante stopped before her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Signorina Romano," he said, voice low, weighted. "You look like you belong here." Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Do I, or am I just playing the part?" The words were sharp, nodding to Marco's betrayal, but her tone carried strength that made Dante linger. "You're not playing anything. That's what makes you interesting." Her brow arched. "Interesting? That's bold, for a stranger." "Not a stranger anymore." His voice was smooth, not flirtatious but deliberate, testing her resolve. "I don't forget faces, especially not yours." Her pulse quickened. Memory flashed of his stare outside Marco's office. She glanced past him, catching Marco across the room, drink in hand, posture rigid, jaw tight as he watched them. Dante followed her glance, lips curving faintly. "He's watching," he murmured, amused. "And he doesn't like it." "Why do you care what he thinks?" Isabella asked, voice low. "I don't." Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, faint scent of smoke and sandalwood curling around her. "But I'm curious about you. Most people would have crumbled after what he did. You didn't." Her throat tightened, his words pressing on raw edges of pain. "You don't know me," she said, though it lacked conviction. "I know enough," Dante replied. "You're not the kind of woman who begs for scraps." Her fingers trembled, champagne threatening to spill. "What do you want, Moretti? I'm not here for games." "No games." His eyes never left hers. "Just a conversation. For now." Across the room, Marco's grip on his glass tightened, whiskey sloshing. He couldn't hear their words, but he saw Dante leaning in, Isabella holding her ground. Jealousy and fear churned in him. Dante's presence was a blade at his throat, a reminder of Salvatore Ricci's ruin, of debts unpaid. One of the partners clapped Marco's shoulder. "You all right?" Marco forced a nod, lips stiff. "Fine." But his eyes never left Isabella and Dante. He downed his drink, the burn useless against panic. He needed to move, get her away, before... Before what? He didn't know. But the thought of them together set his nerves aflame. Isabella felt Marco's stare like a weight, but refused to acknowledge him. Dante's presence was a shield, strange and steady. "Why are you talking to me?" she asked, softer now. "There's a room full of people here. Bigger names, bigger wallets. Why me?" Dante's gaze flickered, something unreadable beneath. "Because you're not chasing anything. Everyone else here is performing. You're real." The word struck like a touch. Unexpected, disarming. Before she could respond, a voice cut through. "Isabella." Marco's voice, sharp. He stood a few feet away, posture stiff, eyes darting between her and Dante. "Can we talk?" Her heart lurched, anger flaring. "We talked, Marco. You said enough." His jaw clenched, but he pressed on. "Please, just a minute." Dante didn't move. His presence expanded, filling space between them. "She's busy," he said calmly, edged with steel. "Unless you have something worth saying." Marco's eyes narrowed, a flush creeping up his neck. "This doesn't concern you, Moretti, doesn't it?" Dante's smile was thin, dangerous. He stepped closer to Isabella, not touching, but close enough to make his point. "I think it does." The air crackled. Conversations faltered. Guests stole glances at the brewing storm. Isabella's pulse raced, caught between Marco's desperation and Dante's quiet power. She didn't know what game was being played, but she felt its weight. "Enough," she said, voice steady despite the storm. She set her glass down on a passing tray, locking eyes on Marco. "You don't get to do this. Not anymore." Then she turned to Dante, chin lifting. "Thank you for the conversation, Mr. Moretti. I think I'm done here." She walked away, heels clicking against marble, leaving both men behind. Marco burned with humiliation, but it was Dante's gaze that followed her, sharp, unwavering, as though he'd just found something he hadn't expected to want. Isabella Romano's heels echoed through the Waldorf's grand foyer as she left the gala, the night air biting against her skin. The emerald gown clung to her like a second skin, its weight a reminder of the eyes she'd left behind. Marco's, desperate and cornered. And Dante's, dark and unreadable. She hailed a cab, breath fogging in the October chill, and slipped inside. Manhattan's lights blurred past the window as she leaned her head against the glass. Her fingers brushed the spot where her wedding ring once sat, skin still indented, a ghost of a promise broken. She didn't look back, but she felt the weight of Dante Moretti's gaze lingering like a shadow she couldn't shake. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Isabella threw herself into her work as an art curator. Gallery openings, client meetings, endless hours cataloging pieces. Anything to keep the ache at bay. But the city, once her playground, felt charged with an undercurrent she couldn't name. It started with a glimpse, Dante Moretti at a midtown bistro, where she met a client for lunch. He sat alone at a corner table, coffee untouched, eyes scanning a newspaper, but flicking to her when he thought she wasn't looking. Their gazes locked for a heartbeat before he nodded, polite, distant, and returned to his paper. 2 days later, she saw him again, this time at the Howard Gallery, where Isabella was overseeing a new exhibit. She felt him before she saw him, a prickle along her skin. He stood across the room, hands in his pockets, studying a Rothko with an intensity that matched the one he'd turned on her at the gala. Their eyes met briefly. His lips curved in that faint, almost smile before he moved on. No words, no approach, just presence. By the third encounter, at her favorite coffee shop on Bleecker Street, her curiosity sharpened into something else. Weariness, maybe, or intrigue. She sat at her usual table by the window, sketching notes for an upcoming auction. The bell above the door chimed. Dante walked in, his charcoal coat dusted with early snow, presence filling the small space like a storm rolling in. He ordered an espresso, voice low, and took a seat 2 tables away. His eyes didn't linger, but she felt them all the same, like a touch she couldn't see. Isabella sipped her latte, steam curling warm against her lips, and stole a glance. Dante's posture was relaxed, one hand resting on the table, the other flipping through a book. The Art of War, her lips twisted. Coincidence? Manhattan was big, but not that big. She tapped her pen against her notebook, rhythm matching her pulse. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't chasing, not in the way men usually did, with charm or cheap lines. He was studying her, like a puzzle he hadn't solved. She gathered her things, brushed past his table, her coat grazing the chair. "You're making a habit of this, Mr. Moretti," she said lightly, testing. His eyes lifted, dark and steady, catching hers like a net. "Am I?" His tone was neutral, but there was a spark, a challenge. "Maybe you're just easy to find." Her breath caught, irritation mixing with something warmer, unnameable. "Or maybe you're looking too hard." She didn't wait for his response. She pushed through the door into the snowy street, heart pounding louder than her footsteps. Across town, Marco DeLuca wasn't sleeping. His sleek Tribeca loft felt like a cage, its glass walls mocking him with reflections of a man unraveling. The walls were lined with awards, framed articles, all reminders of the empire he was losing grip on. He had seen Dante at the gala, seen the way he lingered near Isabella. And now colleagues whispered about spotting Moretti at places Isabella frequented. Cafes, galleries, restaurants, always nearby. Marco's fingers clenched around his phone, unsent text glowing on the screen. "Stay away from her." He deleted it. Confronting Dante directly was suicide. He'd learned that from Salvatore Ricci's downfall, bankruptcy, disgrace, a life erased. But Isabella? She was pulling Dante closer. A beacon Dante circled like a predator. Marco paced to the window, the city's glow cold and unforgiving. Through the grapevine, he heard her movements. Howard Gallery, Bleecker Coffee Shop, always defiant, always composed. And always, Dante close by. His hand shook as he poured whiskey, glass clinking on the counter. He'd underestimated her. He thought she'd fade into the background after he abandoned her. But Isabella was fire now, burning brighter with every slight. And Dante's attention was gasoline. His phone buzzed. "A message from a colleague. Saw Moretti at the Bleecker Coffee Shop today with your ex." Looked cozy. Marco's grip tightened. Cozy. Moretti didn't do cozy. He did strategy, control, power. Marco's mind raced. Dante's stare at the gala, his constant presence in Isabella's orbit. Was it about her or about him? A way to twist the knife deeper? A vendetta? He sank onto the couch, whiskey untouched. The silence pressed in. He'd built his life on careful moves, staying a step ahead. But Dante Moretti was a force you couldn't outmaneuver. And Isabella, she was no longer a pawn in Marco's games with Valentina. She was a player now. And Dante's interest in her was the wild card Marco hadn't anticipated. Outside, snow fell harder, blanketing the city in deceptive calm. Isabella pulled her scarf tight, Dante's words from the coffee shop echoing in her mind. "Maybe you're just easy to find." She didn't know what he wanted. Didn't know if she wanted to find out. But as she passed a gallery window, her reflection caught her eye. Eyes brighter, chin higher. A woman who refused to break. And somewhere out there, she knew Dante Moretti was watching. And Marco DeLuca was crumbling. Snow curtained the village streets outside Isabella Romano's apartment window, dusting the cobblestones in deceptive calm. Inside, her loft glowed warm. Bookshelves stacked with art catalogs, a half-finished sketch on the coffee table, tea steaming beside it. Isabella stood at the window, auburn hair loose, her reflection faint against the glass. Dante Moretti's words lingered like a hum in her mind. "Maybe you're just easy to find." She didn't know what game he played, but his steady, unyielding attention stirred something dangerous, equal parts defiance and curiosity. Across town, Marco DeLuca's world was unraveling. His Tribeca loft, once a symbol of his rise, now felt like a trap. Whiskey bottles littered his counters, his phone buzzing with bad news. A major client had pulled out that morning, citing concerns about reliability. A merger he'd spearheaded stalled. Partners whispered. Associates looked at his corner office like vultures eyeing carrion. He didn't need the name to know whose shadow was behind it. Dante Moretti's influence spread quiet but suffocating. Marco paced, sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled, city glow mocking him from the window. He thought back to the gala, Dante with Isabella, the challenge in his stare. Since then, whispers had sharpened into knives. Another message from his assistant flashed. Sterling deal reassigned to Carter. Partners want a meeting tomorrow. Reassigned. Another crack in the foundation. Marco poured another drink, the burn useless against memories of Salvatore Ricci's collapse. He knows, Marco, I'm done. Salvatore had been destroyed without Dante lifting a finger. And now Marco felt that noose tightening. He needed to act, stop the bleeding. And that meant Isabella. She was the link. The spark drawing Dante closer. If he could pull her away, convince her to stay clear, maybe Dante would lose focus. It was a long shot, but desperation left him no choice. Isabella was leaving her favorite bookstore on Hudson Street, a paper bag of art journals under her arm, when she saw him. Marco. He stood under a street lamp, breath visible in the cold, his tie loose, eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the polished lawyer she had married, more like a man circling the drain. Her stomach twisted, anger flaring. Isabella, he rasped, stepping forward. We need to talk. She stopped, boots crunching in the snow, grip tightening on the bag. You don't get to do this, Marco, not again. Please, just hear me out. 5 minutes. His hands rose in surrender, voice desperate. Her jaw clenched. Memory flashing of him spitting stop, embarrassing yourself in that glass-walled office. You had your chance to talk. You chose to lie instead. Marco stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. I messed up. I know that. But this isn't about us. It's about him. His eyes darted around, as if Dante might emerge from the shadows. Moretti, you need to stay away from him. Isabella laughed, sharp and bitter. You humiliate me, use me, leave me, and now you tell me who I can talk to? You don't get a say. You don't understand. His face flushed. He's dangerous. You think he's just some man at a gala, but he's not. He destroys people, lives, careers, gone. His voice cracked, fear raw in his eyes. Her breath caught. She had never seen Marco afraid, not like this. What did you do, Marco? Why is he after you? He shook his head, raking hands through his hair. It's not about what I did. It's about what he can do. I saw it with Salvatore. One wrong move and everything was gone. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me. Her voice rose, drawing stares from a passing couple. You used me to hurt Valentina. You left me in that hotel room. You don't get to play savior now. Marco's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling. You don't get it. He's not interested in you because he cares. He's using you to get to me. You're a pawn, Isabella. The words stung, but she refused to flinch. If I'm a pawn, it's because you put me on the board. Whatever this is with Moretti, it's your mess, not mine. She turned to walk away, but his hand clamped on her arm. Please, he begged, grip tight. I'm losing everything. My job, my reputation, because of him. Don't make it worse. She yanked free, eyes blazing. You made it worse when you lied. When you left me. You don't get to beg now. Her voice cut cold. Stay away from me, Marco, or I'll make sure Dante knows exactly how scared you are. His face paled, the street lamp casting shadows across his features. For the first time, he looked small, diminished, a man unraveling. Isabella turned, boots crunching, storm in her chest. She didn't see the black car idling across the street, its tinted windows catching the city's glow. Inside, Dante Moretti watched, fingers drumming on the armrest, eyes following Isabella's retreating figure. A faint smile curved his lips. Not triumph, something closer to intrigue. Marco's fear was a thread he could pull. But Isabella? She was something else entirely. And Dante wasn't done watching. The snow had stopped falling, leaving Manhattan's streets slick and reflective under streetlights. Isabella Romano's breath clouded the air as she walked away from Marco. boots crunching against icy pavement, her heart a storm of anger and defiance. His words echoed in her mind. He's using you to get to me. But she shoved them away. Marco's fear no longer dictated her choices. Behind her, unseen, Dante Moretti's black car idled, engine humming low, his gaze fixed on her retreating figure. The city's pulse throbbed around him, but his focus was singular. Across town, Marco stumbled into a bar, the kind where lawyers and brokers drowned failures in overpriced scotch. His tie was gone, shirt collar open, eyes wild with whiskey and panic. He had seen the black car when Isabella walked away. Sleek, predatory, unmistakably Dante's. It had snapped something in him. He couldn't keep dodging, couldn't keep pretending Dante was just a shadow. He was here, circling, and Isabella was the bait. Marco ordered another drink, glass shaking in his hand when the door swung open. The air shifted. Dante Moretti stepped inside. His presence cut through the bar's haze like a blade. Charcoal coat unbuttoned, dark eyes scanning until they landed on Marco. Other patrons laughed, glasses clinked, oblivious. But Marco felt it, weight heavy as chains. Dante didn't approach right away. He ordered a bourbon, movements calm, deliberate, before crossing the room. "DeLuca," he said, voice low, rasp carrying like smoke. He didn't sit, just stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding the glass. Marco's jaw tightened. Fingers gripped his drink like a lifeline. "What do you want, Moretti?" Dante's lips curved, not a smile, more predator than man. "I was about to ask you the same. You seem unsettled." Marco shot to his feet, chair scraping hard against the floor. Heads turned. "Stay away from her," he snapped, voice loud enough to draw stares. "Isabella's not your pawn. Whatever you're planning, leave her out of it." The bar went quiet, but Dante didn't flinch. His gaze locked onto Marco's, unyielding. That faint curve of his lips sharpened. "Careful, DeLuca," he said, tone almost amused. "You're starting to sound desperate." Marco stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "I know what you do. I saw what happened to Salvatore. You think you can ruin me? Use her to do it?" Dante tilted his head, studying him like a specimen under glass. "You give yourself too much credit," he said, voice soft but steel-edged. "This isn't about you." He set his glass on the bar, untouched, and turned to leave. His coat brushed the stool. "But since you're so concerned about Isabella, I'll keep that in mind." Marco's heart pounded, fists clenched, but he didn't move. The bar's noise resumed, yet the air stayed thin, charged with Dante's words. He watched as Dante walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. Then Marco collapsed back into his seat, fight draining out of him. He was losing his career, his control, his grip on everything he'd built. And Dante's smile had been a promise. It wasn't over. Outside, Isabella stood under the awning of a nearby gallery, steadying her breath as she checked her phone. She had felt Marco's desperation earlier, his fear, but it hadn't softened her. She was done being his collateral. The gallery's light spilled onto the sidewalk. She turned to leave and froze. Dante was approaching, his silhouette sharp against the city's glow. Her pulse quickened, that prickle on her skin unmistakable. "Signorina Romano," he said, stopping a few feet away. His voice carried warmth she hadn't heard before. "You're hard to miss, even in a snowstorm." She crossed her arms, scarf loose around her neck. "And you're hard to avoid, Mr. Moretti. What is this about?" He stepped closer, closing the space between them, his eyes searching hers. "I saw you with DeLuca. He's scared, more than he should be." Isabella's lips parted, but she held her ground. "That's his problem, not mine." Dante's gaze softened, just enough to catch her off guard. "Maybe, but I don't like seeing you caught in his mess." She gave a sharp, skeptical laugh. "You're not my protector, Dante. I don't need one." "No," he agreed, voice low, almost tender. "You don't, but I'm here anyway." The words hung heavy, threaded with meaning she didn't fully understand. Her breath caught, anger at Marco fading under the weight of Dante's presence. He didn't touch her, didn't push, but his closeness pulled at her, undeniable. "Come with me," he said, offering his arm. His tone left no room for doubt. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers brushed wool of his coat, and they walked in silence. The city noise faded to a hum until they reached his car. The driver opened the door. Isabella slid inside. Dante followed. His penthouse rose over the city, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling constellations of light. Isabella stood by the glass, her coat draped over a chair, emerald dress glowing in the soft lamplight. Dante poured 2 glasses of wine, handing her one. His fingers brushed hers, deliberate, electric. "Why me?" she asked, voice soft but steady, eyes locked on his. "Why all of this?" He set his glass down, stepping closer. His gaze was intense, but not predatory, raw, unguarded. "Because you're not afraid," he said. "Not of him, not of me. I've watched you, Isabella. You burn brighter than anyone in this city." Her heart raced, his words unraveling defenses she thought unbreakable. His hand grazed her cheek, thumb tracing her jaw. She didn't pull away. The kiss came slow, deliberate, tender and needful all at once. His hand slid to her waist, drawing her closer. She responded, fingers tangling in his hair, world narrowing to heat and touch. They moved to the bedroom, city lights fading behind. Every touch, every breath was revelation. His hands mapped her skin, sure, careful, hungry. Her pulse thrummed. For the first time, she saw the depth of his obsession. Not curiosity, something deeper. A hunger mirroring her own. As they lay together, the city silent below, Isabella felt her pain lift. Replaced by something dangerous, but hers to claim. The city's pulse thrummed faintly beyond Dante Moretti's penthouse windows, a constellation of lights flickering like distant fire. Isabella Romano lay in the expanse of his bed, silk sheets cool against her skin, auburn hair spilling across the pillow like embers. Dante's arm rested lightly over her waist, his breath steady in sleep, but Isabella's eyes stayed open, tracing the ceiling's shadows. The night had been a revelation. His touch tender yet fierce, a slow unraveling of walls she had built since Marco's betrayal. And yet, in the stillness, questions crept in. Who was Dante Moretti really? And what did it mean to be seen by him? She slipped carefully from the bed, padding to the window in her silk slip. Manhattan sprawled below, glittering and indifferent. Her reflection stared back, eyes bright, lips flushed, but a flicker of unease in her expression. Dante's pursuit felt like a tide pulling her in, powerful and consuming. But beneath its pull, she sensed the undercurrent, danger. Downstairs, her emerald dress hung over a chair, her coat folded neatly. She dressed quietly, fingers lingering on the fabric where his hands had been. She didn't leave, not yet. But she needed air, needed space to think. The elevator ride down was silent, her thoughts tangled between desire and doubt. When she stepped onto the street, the early morning chill bit into her skin, grounding her. Over the next week, Dante's presence became constant, not overwhelming but undeniable. At her favorite bookstore on Hudson, he lingered by the history section, a faint smile curving when their eyes met. He asked her opinion on a biography she'd never read. At the Bleecker Cafe, he sat a table away, reading quietly, gaze flicking up when she laughed with the barista. At the Met Sculpture Garden, he stood near a marble statue, silent but steady, until she found herself crossing the gravel just to speak. "You're everywhere," Isabella said one afternoon, her voice light but testing, as they stood beneath a Rodin sculpture. Her scarf fluttered in the breeze, eyes narrowing on him. Dante's lips curved into that almost smile she was learning to recognize. "Am I?" He stepped closer, his coat brushing her arm, voice low. "Or are you just noticing me now?" Her pulse quickened, but she didn't look away. "Don't play games, Dante. If you're here for a reason, say it." His eyes darkened, unreadable, yet there was a softness beneath the steel. "I'm here because I want to be," he said simply. "Because you're worth seeing." The words hit her like a touch, stirring memories of his hands, his kiss. She felt safe with him, strangely safe, like standing at a cliff's edge with someone who could catch you. Or push you. "You don't know me," she said, softer now, testing. "I know enough." His tone laced with quiet possession, not demanding but certain. "I know you're stronger than he ever gave you credit for." Isabella's throat tightened. Marco's betrayal lingered like a shadow, but Dante's certainty pressed against it, threatening to burn it away. She glanced aside, fingers brushing her scarf. Dante didn't press. He never did. His pursuit was a quiet storm, intense, protective, but always leaving her the choice. And it was that restraint, that edge of control, that unsettled her more than anything. Across town, Marco DeLuca was unraveling. His office, once a throne room, now felt like a cage. Another client pulled out of a deal. Partners whispered. Associates hovered, waiting for his fall. He knew Dante's hand was behind it, felt it like a noose tightening. And Isabella, in Dante's orbit, was a blade twisting in his gut. He had seen them together, at the cafe, at the gallery, Dante watching her like a hawk. Marco's fear was no longer just business. It was personal. He thought of Salvatore Ricci's ruined life, the limp, the hollow eyes, and he knew Dante wasn't just circling. He was moving in. Marco couldn't let Isabella become another piece in Moretti's game. He had to try one last time. The Met's Grand Hall glittered with light, the charity auction drawing Manhattan's elite. Isabella stood near a display of impressionist paintings, her navy gown shimmering like midnight, hair swept into an elegant twist. A glass of champagne in her hand, but her eyes weren't on the art. She was searching for him. Dante had promised, "See you tonight. Wear something bold." The anticipation made her nerves hum. And then she saw him. Across the hall, Dante cut a striking figure in a black tuxedo. His presence pulled the air toward him. He spoke briefly to a curator, lips curved faintly, but his eyes found hers. Locked on, intense enough to steal her breath, she started toward him, heels clicking across marble, when a hand grazed her arm. "Isabella," Marco's voice low, urgent. His face pale under chandeliers, tie askew, eyes darting like prey. Her jaw tightened. "I told you to stay away, Marco. I meant it." "We need to talk," he hissed, desperation seeping through. "You don't understand what you're walking into. Moretti, he's not what you think. He's using you to get to me, to finish what he started years ago. Please, Isabella. Walk away," she laughed, sharp, cutting. "You don't get to warn me about anyone. You lost that right when you left me on our wedding night." Marco flinched, guilt twisting into panic. "I'm trying to protect you. He's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of." Before Isabella could answer, a shadow fell between them. Dante Moretti, his presence a quiet storm, eyes fixed on Marco with a predator's smile. "DeLuca," he said smoothly, voice edged with steel. "You're interrupting." Marco's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't back down. "Stay away from her, Moretti. This is between me and Isabella." Dante's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened, a silent warning. "She's not yours anymore. She never was, and now, she's mine." The words cut like a blade. The air crackled. Guests glanced over, whispers faltering. Isabella's heart pounded. Not from fear, but from the weight of Dante's claim. Possessive, yes, but protective. Final. Marco's face drained of color. His hands clenched. But he said nothing. Dante turned to Isabella, offering his arm, gaze softening as it met hers. "Shall we?" he asked, voice low, intimate, as if Marco no longer existed. She placed her hand on his arm. Fingers steady, though her chest thundered. Together, they walked away, leaving Marco frozen amid the murmurs of the crowd. The auction glittered around her, but Isabella felt only Dante. His warmth, his certainty, the dangerous edge she was beginning to crave. Later, in his penthouse, they stood by the windows, the city sprawling below. His hands framed her face, his kiss slow, deep, more than possession. A promise, and Isabella realized, as his lips moved against hers, that she had gone from the ashes of her wedding night to standing beside the man Marco feared most, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. "You said..." The city stretched endlessly beneath the penthouse windows, its glow flickering like embers against the glass. Isabella Romano leaned into Dante Moretti's chest, his arm heavy around her shoulders, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat grounding her in a way nothing else had. But when sleep finally claimed her, it was restless. She slipped from his embrace in the early dawn, padding barefoot across marble floors. Her reflection stared back from the window, eyes bright but shadowed, lips still swollen from his kiss. She pressed a hand against the glass. The skyline was beautiful, but it was also a maze of ambition, secrets, and danger, and she was standing at its center now, beside a man who inspired as much fear as he did desire. Who was Dante Moretti, really? And what did it mean to belong to him? Over the next days, his presence became inescapable, not suffocating, but deliberate, calculated. At her bookstore, he appeared in the history aisle, pretending to browse while watching her. At the cafe, he sat close enough to feel present, distant enough to give her room. At the Met Garden, his gaze tracked her every move, his silence louder than words. "You're everywhere," Isabella told him one afternoon, standing beneath a Rodin sculpture, scarf fluttering in the breeze. "Am I?" His lips curved faintly, that dangerous almost smile. "Or are you just noticing me now?" She narrowed her eyes. "Don't play games. If you're here for a reason, say it." Dante's eyes softened briefly, an intensity that disarmed her. "I'm here because I choose to be. Because you're worth seeing." Her pulse stuttered. She wanted to believe it. But part of her still heard Marco's desperate voice warning, "He's using you to get to me." And yet every time Dante stepped closer, every time his eyes locked onto hers, she felt something undeniable, something she hadn't felt in years: power. Meanwhile, Marco De Luca was unraveling. His office no longer commanded respect. It smelled of fear. Another client gone, another partner questioning his judgment. His empire, once untouchable, was collapsing under Dante's shadow. He had built his career on careful manipulation, always one step ahead. But Dante was a force you couldn't outmaneuver, and Isabella, no longer his pawn, was now the wild card in Dante's hand. Marco drowned in whiskey and panic, staring at his phone, half-drafted threats and pleas unsent. He remembered Salvatore Ricci's ruin, the limp, the hollow eyes. And he knew the same fate was closing in. But worse than losing his career was losing her. The night of the charity auction burned into Isabella's memory. The moment Dante stepped between her and Marco, declaring, "She's mine now," that line was etched into her bones. And she hadn't run. She hadn't flinched. She had taken Dante's arm and walked away. Now, standing once again in his penthouse, she faced him by the window, city lights framing his profile. His hands framed her face, eyes burning into hers, not just with possession, but with something deeper. "You don't scare me," she whispered, though her pulse raced. Dante's mouth curved, dark and certain. "Good, fear is for enemies. And you, Isabella," his thumb brushed her cheek. "You're not my enemy, you're mine." His kiss sealed the words, slow, deep, final. Isabella felt the last remnants of her doubt melt away, replaced with dangerous clarity. She had gone from the ashes of a wedding night betrayal to standing beside the man Marco De Luca feared most, the Mafia boss who claimed her. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was alive.